we're at the start of 2025, and faith in the AAA games industry is at pretty much an all-time low. So I want to go over an article that came out a couple days ago that I got attention of, and how it looks pretty bad for the games industry, at least on an optics level. So start out, my name's Ojiro, I've been making games for a decade and a half. I was going through my standard evening ritual of making dinner, making dinner, and listening to the latest Rev Says Desu video. And in it, we got this bit where old Reverence here talks about an article from The Gamer. So I went and looked at it a little later just to see what it was. A lot of the initial complaints I've seen from people on this article is just, oh no, more women in games, which isn't super valid. Like, let's be realistic. It's a 50-50 split in the States. More women are getting into games, especially in the social game side of things. That isn't a big deal. However, there's more in here in this article that raised a lot of red flags with me. And before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit about census info for the United States, right? So on the census site, it's just a bunch of numbers. If you're big into spreadsheets like EVE Online, this may be it for you. I had Grok break it down for me. Let's go over some census data. In general, white, non-Hispanic in the United States, that is 57.8% of the population. And then Hispanic, just shy of 19, Black and African American around 12, and progressively lower for other groups of people. Another thing I want to point out, the percentage of the U.S. population that identifies as LGBT plus is, as of 2023 from a Gallup survey, is 7.6%, right? And of that, if we go over the actual Gallup survey, about half of those people just identify as bisexual, which is kind of ridiculous, but whatever. So let's get back over here. So we've got an issue in the games industry right now where a lot of companies are ideologically captured, and they are not hiring people based on merit, but because of the color of their skin and who they sleep with. This is a known issue. So we've got at the top where it's pointing out that males still make up 66% of game developers, and almost a quarter of developers identify as LGBTQ. Remember, there's 7% of the population in the US. Thing that really struck me as crazy, that's already pretty absurd in general. You can expect in certain industries there to be more people that identify as that. Like, I hear a lot of people that work in Hollywood flock to that particular line of work. So, you know, that is something. But the thing that really struck me, almost half of developers aged between 18 and 24 identify as LGBTQ, with women far more likely to do so. This metric does not get met naturally. And we've had an issue that we've talked about as something that's been going on as a bigger and bigger issue in games, where people are not hiring based on merit, but instead of these other traits. And when you have these people get in, and you have companies that, instead of focusing on making a good product, caring about gamers, modders, whatever kind of scene you are working in, and you instead prioritize identity, that drives that metric. If I have a company that I work at and its main focus is having hard workers, you're going to get a lot of hard workers that get hired because that is the thing that the company focuses on. Low performers are going to leave because they are not hard workers. The inverse is true as well. If I have a company of lazy people and I get a hard worker, and that hard worker is going to say, I'm doing all this hard work and I'm not getting rewarded, why am I doing this hard work? And they either leave or just do less. In this case, it looks like a lot of these companies are saying, you know what we need? More diversity. And then as those people that are diversity hires get up into a position where they are a part of the hiring process, the focus isn't on quality. The focus is instead on identity. When we have 7% of the US population, and let's assume that Europe is similar. I'm not going to look into Europe. Let's assume even if more people that identify as this flock into the games industry, it should not make up almost half. There's no way. You're going to tell me out of 10 people that come in that are qualified, somehow 6 of them are straight, and then the rest of them identify as LGBTQ. The math does not add up. This looks like a huge red flag where people are putting identity over merit, which is, there's so many issues here. One issue is illegal. You can't do these kinds of things with discriminatory hiring practices. Another thing is it shows lack of people that are focusing on who's a good fit for the company in terms of getting good work done. And that is reflected in the work that these places put forward. We've seen a huge uptick in places where they're just like, you know what we need to make our game about? Sending a message instead of making a good game. And those games are catastrophic failures. They are huge wastes of money in terms of investors. We've seen more and more investors pushing for higher and higher prices. Recently, we had people that were saying, wow, I really hope the new Grand Theft Auto game costs $100 to make that the new norm. How many of you were excited to pay $100 for a game that comes out that is not only a pile of garbage, but is just filled with messaging? Because the focus of these studios, which for these studios, most of them are going to be AAA, right? Because that's where all the hiring goes. These companies are extremely bloated. It's not unusual to have 300 plus, maybe even 3,000 people working on specific games. Ubisoft alone has 20,000 people working with them. Well, 19,000 last I checked, but it's still an insane amount of people. Over 3,000 people worked on Diablo 4, and that thing's a joke. Like, this is, when I see this, I think this is a rot that is spreading further and further into these companies. And it just solidifies my personal belief that a lot of these places need to just be shut down. Because if you have, like, I've worked at places where we've had people that are terrible workers, but we don't fire them because there's a concern that we're going to get sued. It is usually people that identify on the LGBTQ side, but occasionally it's people that are old. In California, there were ageism claims. So if someone was above a certain age, we were just like, they're not good at their job. We should fire them. But look, it's going to cause too much trouble. We can't risk it. So we keep them on until a wave of layoff happens, which games, there's always a wave of layoff that's going to happen. And then you let the poor performers go. And then there's no, well, at least there's a reduced chance of people complaining and saying, I've been discriminated against. Whereas every case I've seen people getting let go has been because they've been terrible workers. This is really concerning. I don't like seeing places that do discriminatory hiring practices. Not only is it bad for the product, it's illegal, it's going to cause more issues. And then when these projects eventually fail, all of that cost is passed on to the consumer. All of it. It comes down in the form of paying for the box price. It comes down in the form of more microtransactions in a game. It comes in the price of just everything that they can throw at you to try and make up for the fact that they are letting these companies be taken over by activists. So that's all I really wanted to talk about this morning. It was really disappointing to see this. I'll link Old Reverence's video below. And this particular link, you can look up the census data on your own if you want. I suggest just using AI to give you whatever the answer is, because it makes it easier to read the actual thing that you want to ask out of it. But that's all for this morning. I'm going to get to work now, and I wish you all a great weekend. Farewell. Wrong window.